What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Julian Farah here from the Photosfera photography channel, and I'm back today with a video to show you guys two ways on how I sharpen my raw images. One is called capture sharpening and one is called high pass sharpening. One happens in Lightroom and one happens in Photoshop. I got asked a question by one of my followers on social media, and they wanted to know how I sharpen my images via Lightroom and Photoshop, not for export, but during the process of photo editing. So let's get started. I decided to use one of the images that I recently snapped probably a couple of weeks ago and that I posted. Okay, so this is an image I shot a couple of weeks back. It was taken, as you can see over here, by the EXIF data at 300 millimeters f5, 1/1000th of a second, ISO 250. It was taken in Montreal during what's supposed to be our new rush hour during the pandemic. It's quite crazy to see. Anyhow, when I start an image, this isn't going to be a full post-processing of a picture. It's just going to show you the sharpening aspect. So I'm going to close these tabs over here, and I'm going to bring this down at the bottom. Sorry, at the top. So the way I sharpen my images, first of all, is I use what's called capture sharpening. So I basically lower the actual size density of the individual pixels, and I sharpen those individually. Let me see if I can make that a little bit easier for you to understand, okay? So first of all, I only really look at zones that need to be sharpened, such as zones of bright luminosity or medium style luminosity, mid-range or mid-tones. Deep shadows and actual darks, such as over here, this area right over here, I'm not as concerned. As you can see right here, these are the dark areas. I'm not as concerned with these areas because people don't really look in a really dark area. Shadows are one thing. These would be considered shadows because they're not completely clipped. They're still legible to the human eye. So we still want to focus on those. We definitely want to focus on stuff that's, in our broad highlight spectrum region, stuff like this. Stuff that's in our bright levels. These are areas of white that are completely blown out. They're not as urgent, but we can still focus on those. Okay, so if we zoom in to our image, so let's say we go to zoom on image. Let's go over here to our 1:1 to zoom in. Okay, and we look around here. Now, over here, this is an area that I'm looking to sharpen a little bit, and here's my sharpening tab. I'll always start by opening up my sharpening tab and a second over here. Bringing up my sharpening to a little bit, maybe 5 over here. And here's where the capture sharpening happens. So I bring my radius down to about 0.5. That's basically telling me to basically sharpen or lower the size of each individual pixel so it won't be as noisy. And then I bring up my detail to selectively see where I'm sharpening, okay? So let's say we're looking, I don't know, let's say we're looking over here at this little clock. I would bring up my sharpening until I see an actual sharpened image really happening. So, okay, for me, usually between 20 and 75 makes sense. That's usually where I sharpen the image. That's the start, depending on what I'm shooting. Like I said, if we're looking in very dark areas, it's not really a good idea, because nobody really sharpens there anyway. Another thing I do is I use the masking tool. I hold Alt on the keyboard, grab the masking tool, and I sharpen selectively. Now what this does is it basically chooses what is going to be sharpened. As you drag in the slider, anything that's really highlighted in white will be affected by the sharpening. Anything that's highlighted in black will not. So let's say we sharpen this much. If you look in the street, and the two areas of blue that I sort of highlighted in the blacker areas, the sharpening is not going to be affected very much over there. So Lightroom is going to mask out those areas selectively, okay? Where you see the bright areas in white, well, those areas will be sharpened. And this is a very handy masking tool that you can choose to use when you're dealing with high contrast areas from black and white, meaning shadow and light. Hold Alt on your keyboard and go down to masking. But you do need to make sure, obviously, that you have some sharpening selected before you do that, okay? So that would be the first way to sharpen, and that happens in Lightroom, and it's called capture sharpening. Now, as a photo editor, I only preliminary start in Lightroom. and I do a lot of my work in Photoshop. I figured that there's a lot more control in Photoshop. And after this competition that I'm going to be having on Instagram, I'm going to be giving away a 1-hour session with one of my followers to show them my post-processing workflow and most of what I do. I'll tell you one thing, there's nothing like water, guys. I also use a Wacom tablet to do my editing. I use a really cheap one. This is like the entry-level Wacom tablet. I don't even know which one it is. It's the Intuos, I think it's 3 or 2. I think it was like $100. And honestly, at the beginning, it felt a little bit weird using it. It's 3 years I use it now. But after you get used to it and you get used to the pen pressures, it's really hard to not use a Wacom tablet. Anyway, so let's jump into Photoshop now. Okay, this is the same image in Photoshop. You're going to see that in Photoshop, all my editing and all my color grading is in fact there. That's okay. Just to give you an idea what kind of photo editing you can do, that's before and that's after. Before the image was edited, after. Before, when it came out of Lightroom, after Photoshop editing. Just to give you the massive difference that an edit can do and how much post-processing affects an image. But how would I sharpen in Photoshop? Well, it's called high pass sharpening. So let's delete all these layers, okay? The first thing I do when I'm gonna capture, or when I'm gonna sharpen, sorry, in Photoshop, as I zoom in, so I use Control and the plus or minus key to zoom in. Then I hold spacebar to look where I wanna sharpen. So we've zoomed in over here, let's just say significantly, okay? So let's just say, I don't know, we want to highlight, we want to sharpen here. Once again, we'll focus on these bricks again, just because I find this is the easiest area. We'll focus right here. Okay, right here. The first thing you need to do in Photoshop when you high pass sharpen is create a new layer, or what's what we call a stamp layer. A stamp layer basically includes everything you've done up to speed. So let's say you have all these layers. Let's say, here, I'll show you what I mean. Let's say over here, you have all your layers, you have a bunch of adjustments that were done. I'm creating layers now. Let's just say I had done a bunch of things. Okay, a couple of edits, blah, blah, blah. I've done some layers, I've done some edits. Okay, so let's just say I have 2 layers on my image. In order to create a stamp layer, you need to hold Control, Alt, Shift, E. On a Mac, that would be Command, Option, Shift, E. And what a stamp layer does, okay, let me see if I can annotate that for you so it makes it easier for you guys. So it would be Control, Alt, Shift, E. Oopsie. Control, Alt, Shift, E. Yeah, I know. I'm doing this thing. I'm doing it live. I'm typing this stuff up live. I feel like it's more interactive, and that would bring you into what we call a stamp layer. If we were on a Mac, it would be Command, Option, Shift, E, and that creates a stamp layer, guys. And a stamp layer is pretty much everything, everything that you've done underneath this layer. So this would be over here. This would be considered the stamp layer right over here. This layer right here would be considered the stamp layer because it basically has everything that we've done underneath. So any changes you've made under, everything will be in the stamp layer, okay? So the stamp layer is the layer that you need to create your sharpening on. So I call this HPF, high pass filter layer, okay? Then, once again, we look at our image, okay? And we look at where we want to sharpen. Well, I mean, very strictly speaking, obviously we want to sharpen a lot of the image. We don't want to sharpen these areas in the sky. They're kind of useless to me. We don't want to sharpen these dark areas. We don't really need to sharpen this Porsche. It's kind of out of focus, or this area of bokeh, or any of the area of the street over here, in my opinion, because it's quietly not very important. I don't really believe any of these cars are important. Maybe these street lights. What's really important, what's really, really, really important is this. So let's go to draw. This area right here is the important area of sharpening, right? So this is the area that we want to sharpen, okay? So let me just erase this for you. There we go, okay. So what do we do next? Well, then we go into our filter window. So filter, we go down to other, and we go to high pass. Okay, and this brings up the high pass filter tab, and you're going to see the high pass filters over here. You can see it in gray over here. Okay, the more you bring the high pass filter up, the more sharpening it creates. Obviously, you cannot go overboard because you're going to create massive edging. For me, when it comes to a Canon 5D4 or a Canon EOS R, a 30 megapixel camera, I tend to go with a value of 2.5. When it comes to a smaller 20 to 25 megapixel camera, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 makes sense. So we put our radius to 2.5, we hit OK. Then we need to change our blending mode to overlay or soft light. I tend to go with overlay. Overlay gives a bit of a stronger effect, okay? Now you have to have a little bit of knowledge about how masks work in Photoshop to understand this. So we'd have to hold Alt or Option on a Mac and create a black mask. And a black mask effectively hides everything that we've done here. So right now there will be no sharpening anywhere on the image because the black mask hides everything. So now we hit B for brush. Here's our brush. If you want to know where that is, right there. We bring our flow. I use my flow around 20%. I'm happy with 20% and 100% opacity. Now we could paint in, see our color palette in white because white is the opposite of black. Black conceals and white reveals. So we need to paint with a white brush on a black layer if we want to start revealing that area of sharpening. So let's zoom in. I'm holding Control and I'm zooming in. Close our bracket. You can use the open bracket or close bracket keys to make your mouse bigger or smaller. So it would be these keys, this to make it bigger or that to make it smaller. So that gives you an idea. So now we're here. We want to sharpen. Remember, everything has been covered by our black mask. So let's sharpen. Let's zoom in a little bit more and let's sharpen and see, well, for instance, what's happening. Okay, so here we are. Okay. Okay. So you're going to see the subtle effect of the sharpening now. You'll have to look closely, but it's going to be there, okay? So we have our white brush and we go over here and let's start painting in this area of the clock. And you're going to see we're painting this in gradually, okay? The sharpening effect will happen, but it's going to happen gradually. And if you turn on our mask, hold Alt and click on the mask, you're going to see the areas where we started painting in our sharpening. That means the white area is the area where I've selectively chosen to sharpen the image. Okay? There's some areas that will make sense that you're going to see it, and there's some areas that you won't see it. Okay? So it might not be apparent to you, but look. Okay? Here's to turn the layer off. That's before the sharpening. That's after the sharpening. Before the sharpening, after. Before, after. Look at the clock. Before, after. So it might not make a big difference when you look at it like that, but when you start to globally sharpen an image from the outside, so we go over here, we sharpen over here, let's sharpen over here. All the areas to me that I want sharpened. The individuals walking along the street should be sharpened. Okay, the bricks in the background should be sharpened. This is called high pass sharpening, guys, and it's selectively choosing where you want to sharpen an image. Okay? Even over here, look over here. You grab these areas right over here. I find these areas completely make sense right here. All these areas where you see me pointing these out, these are all areas where the light is falling. So you want to sharpen those areas because the light is falling here. The eye is being drawn here. And remember, we're always painting in white, always white, because we created a black layer mask. And if we hold Alt and click on our layer mask, we see all the areas of white where we've been sharpening selectively. Okay? So let's keep sharpening. Sharpen, sharpen, sharpen. And if we zoom into the image and we turn off our layer mask and we... So let's just say if the sharpening made a difference. So it did. Obviously, when you introduce sharpening, you do introduce noise. That's a normal conception. You can also do selective noise reduction. That'll be another type of video. So let me turn the layer off for you. I want you guys to look right here now. Look right over here, okay? Watch. Turn it off, turn my mouse back on. So here we go. The layer's off, the sharpening is off. Now it's on. It's off, now it's on. Look at the massive difference that that's creating in your sharpening. This is how you selectively sharpen an image. So if we were to recap that, and you want to put that in writing and make it easier for you guys to understand in a simple text, here it is. Number one, create stamp layer. Meaning, Control-Alt-Shift-E on a PC, Command-Option-Shift-E. Number two, open Filters tab. Open Filters tab. Go to Others. Bypass. Filter. Bypass filter. Between 1.0 and 2.5, depending on the camera. Change the blend mode. 2. Overlay or soft light. Soft light. Create a black mask. How do you do that, guys? Let me do it again for you. I'll show you how to make the mask again, just so you understand. We have a layer right here, new layer. Okay, let's create a new layer. There's our layer. We want to create a mask. Here's our mask icon right over here. This is the layer mask icon. We hold Alt or Option on a Mac and click. There's our black mask. We've created a black mask. If you want to invert that, Control-I or Command-I to invert the mask from white to black. Black is concealing everything you've done. And then we selectively take a white brush and paint in the areas of sharpening. And that's it. There you have it. That would be the tutorial for today. I know it was a little bit long. I'm trying to make this as easy to understand, obviously, as possible. So I hope that was helpful, guys. I hope that you learned something. And if you have any questions, please shoot me a request on Instagram, on Facebook, on my email. If you liked the video today, feel free to subscribe. Other than that, I wish you guys a great day, and I'm looking forward to your entries for the competition. So have a great day, guys.